Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. And before I begin my video and you'd like to use OCD Recovery's coaching services, please reach out to phil@ocdrecovery.com and he will get back to you as quick as he can. So yeah, I wanted to speak about magic thinking in this video. And I struggled a lot with magic thinking in my journey. And I think it's a really, really difficult theme to negotiate, right? Because with magic thinking, you think you have all this control. You think you have a say in whether like bad things will happen or not, and your mind just sort of pulls you into thinking that you have all this control, and obviously it's very irrational, right? You sort of make links between certain events. So you might say, oh, because I've stepped on these three drains, something bad's going to happen to a family member. Or, oh, if I don't tap my pen 6 times, then I'm going to leave my house and get run over. Obviously, it doesn't make any sense, but we can't use logic in OCD, and that's the most frustrating thing. It lures you into thinking that because it sounds so silly, you can just use reassurance to get yourself out of it. You can say to yourself, yeah, I can keep doing this silly ritual because I know that it's silly deep down, and yeah, my brain's just going to accept it, and yeah, it will go away because it's just silly and it makes no sense. But that doesn't work, because with OCD, the logic just goes out of the window, and that's what I found very, very difficult to accept. Even though it just sounded so silly and so stupid, I was just stuck in the cycle for magic thinking because I took it lightly. I thought, oh yeah, I'll be able to think my way out of this. This is silly. This isn't going to last forever. But no, and it's also very frustrating in that regard, because you think that you shouldn't be so consumed in something that sounds so silly, but you are, because it's OCD, right? So when I had my magic thinking, I was making all of these links. I think a lot of it ties in with being a bad person, which is an irrational concept in itself. Doing bad things, a bit of harm OCD in there. I think that sort of correlates with magic thinking. And in my personal journey, with magic thinking, what I did was, and you might be able to relate and see if you can maybe like learn something. So I basically made up a lie about my granddad going to hospital to get out of doing something, right? I remember I was at university. I didn't want to go to an event, like some sort of drinking event. Just didn't want to go, right? But I made up an excuse not to go. Said that, and then bang, magic thinking just latched. It said, because you said that, something's going to happen to your granddad. Because you've said this means you're a bad person. And then the rumination cycle just started. It was all I thought about 24/7 for a long, long period of time. Felt really, really depressed over it. Just sort of spiraled into this sort of depression cycle. Had to go on loads of different medication for that. But yeah, so after I said that, obviously there's no link. Rationally, there's no link between me saying a lie about my granddad going to hospital and then me being at fault. Like rationally, there's no link, but obviously OCD doesn't let you off the hook. So I had to break down being a bad person, the fact that I'm fallible as a human. It's impossible for me to act morally under all circumstances. It's impossible for me to be a good person, as it were, because being an entirely good person doesn't make a lot of sense. If you're entirely good, then you're saying that every act, deed and trait in your life that you've ever done can only be good, and you've got no propensity to do bad things. It's a complete global label, which just doesn't really make any sense. Which is obviously the same for a bad person. You can act badly, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's your entirety, because again, we're too complex to rate. We've got numeral acts, deeds and traits. But yeah, with magic thinking, it just did not let me off the hook. So I ruminated all day long for many, many years after that. That self-torture that puts you through, the guilt that it gives you. Again, I had strong demands that, like, I absolutely shouldn't have said this, like this shouldn't happen. again, which is irrational because, you know, if something really shouldn't happen, it would be impossible for it to happen, but it did. And with magic thinking, what I had to do was I had to get under the worst case scenario, right? Because it just wasn't letting me off the hook. So that worst case scenario for me was actually being at fault for my granddad's death, right? That was the worst case scenario. Until I got under that, that did not let me off the hook. So I had to say, well, look, even if I was at fault for my granddad's death, you know, I wouldn't like it. I'd be very, very sad. It'd be very unfortunate if that did happen. However, even if that did happen, I could still accept myself as a human being. Other people have done before. You know, people cause accidents from car crashes. You know, people like murder each other. People fight each other. You know, war. And it took me a while to see that, you know, even if I was at fault, that I could accept myself. Sure, it wouldn't be great. I also had to look at death. Say, you know what, death isn't actually entirely awful. Even if you was responsible for that, yes, I'll be very, very sad. But realistically, death isn't 100% awful because it's the absence of suffering. So, and you know, it takes away the hardships of life. And also, my granddad, like, quite old, and he's lived a very, very good life. Been fortunate to live the life that he's had. So obviously, that's only in my specific case, but yeah, the whole idea of that was just to bring down the catastrophizing about death, potentially being at fault for something bad happening to somebody, which sort of folds into magic thinking OCD, as I've said. And yeah, if you can, just don't get so hung up on it sounding irrational, because OCD doesn't care about logic, right? I remember what I did was I would compare it to certain situations. So I would say, as like a reassurance sort of thing, I'd say, oh, so I quite like betting on football matches. So I'd say, oh, I've just bet on my team, West Ham, to win 2-0. Yes, if that happens, then that's obviously not my fault, because like physically the football match is happening. I've got no control over the football match. And then I'd try and use that as reassurance for my magic thinking OCD. But again, my brain still wasn't able to see that. And it's like, I don't know, I'd look at a plane in the sky and I'd say, oh yeah, I'm gonna, this plane's still in the air flying. There's no way that I could just possibly think this plane to come down, because physically that's what would happen. And also I'd say, if people were, if magic thinking was a thing, people would be going to prison, or everybody would be in prison for crimes they haven't actually committed, because they're committing crimes based on some magic link that you're making up. So I'd use that as a reassurance. But again, that didn't really cut it. You know, I had to look at the worst case scenario for me and actually get under that. And yeah, it took me a while, and it felt very frustrating along the journey, as I've said, because I thought, then what's the point in me doing this? There's no link anyway. If I'm doing this disputing homework, it's just actually maybe reinforcing that I actually am at fault. And that sort of made me very, very scared as well. But yeah, I just had to get under the worst case scenario. I had to do an exposure as well, which was making up a lie to somebody about my granddad being in hospital, just as I was going about my day. I really didn't want to do that, because I thought, oh, what if I get triggered again? What if all this comes back about me being a bad person or me being at fault? But generally speaking, with magic thinking, you're going to have to, you know, go towards those exposures. For example, you know, you might be avoiding walking on three drains, as I said earlier, or you might be doing some sort of ritual to try and stop something happening. You're genuinely going to have to go towards those exposures and try and refrain from doing the ritual. Otherwise, you know, OCD is just going to stay locked on. So yeah, I think with magic thinking, it's just a tough one, because it's quite sort of an unusual type, but it also can get us very, very consumed in the cycle. And because of its ties with harm OCD, and you know, about who we are as a person, we can really sort of ruminate on that quite a lot. So yeah, you're just going to need to try and if you've got other themes going on, you're going to need to try and treat this theme the same as the other themes. So what are the core fears? You know, what exposures can you do? How can you change your perspective on the worst case scenario? Because at the end of the day, looking at the worst case scenario with the unconditional self-acceptance and unconditional life acceptance is going to be the only way that you really, really get under this. And yeah, it took me a lot of work, and yeah, now I'm all right with magic thinking. You know, one thing as well is coming back in my head actually. After I said that about my granddad, I'd be like calling him up to see how he was. Like going around his house, seeing how he is, like on really regular occasions, which is obviously a compulsion. So yeah, when you do actually sort of work towards your recovery, you're going to obviously have to cut those compulsions out as well, you know, bit by bit by bit. I'm not saying they're going to go straight away. I'm not saying it's going to be easy to do that right away, but you're just going to need to sort of gradually build it up and just chip away at it bit by bit by bit. So yeah, I hope this video helps, guys, and I'll see you on the next one.